I would like to create now, the next one should be easier one. Let's go ahead and create a date, you know, date circle. Let's call it date circle dot jsx. Again, let me copy paste the code. RFC. Let's go ahead here. Copy. Better. Let's put it here. Now, save. Nothing spectacular over here. I have a simple stupid function, takes it in a date variable. I'm just logging it to see if all the values are correct. I don't need it. I define my array for all the date of the months in English because I need to convert a date, which is a number, into actual string. In real life, you would probably make a call to some API to get the string values. I get the month, I get the date, and then I have the date circle. Again, it's styled components. Nothing major over here, right? Let's go ahead, create our story for that. So it should be date circle dot stories dot js, not jsx, because it's not a template. Remember that. Let's go ahead, copy it. I will copy and paste the code here. What am I doing? Everything seems to be the same. I do need this one. React, I import my date. That's my argument, the default one. Since it's a date, because I have to put in the date control, as you can see, my input variable is a date object. It's not a string. Then I need to tell Storybook that it's of the type date, and that's what I'm doing over here. I define my template. I define my first story, and I return the date circle object. Pretty straightforward, and I also specify a default value. So what should happen now? I should be able to not only see my date component, I should also be able to play around with the values. Let's go ahead, and if I share my screen, that's my date, and this is what it is rendering. I have my date variable. I can go ahead and change it to anything else I want. Let's change it 6, and it changes to 6th of December, you see. And this is the way you can also test your components. Pretty cool. Of course, it goes without saying that you can have multiple variables, inputs, params slash props if you would like to have. And that's why Storybook, yeah, I said it right this time, is really cool. Let me see if I'm doing something special in date circle worth explaining. Yes. If let's see our HTML for this one. Put the C, let's go ahead, let's go up. You can close this one. How am I rendering this div? How am I rendering my component? What is the HTML rendered is pretty straightforward. Let's put it a bit down. So I have my main class, which is date circle, and some random numbers. This is my CSS, and within that I have a P object, and I have an for the date and for the string. And that thing, these two things, the P's are coming from actually are coming from this value. It's a standard CSS selector, nothing really major about it. And this is simple CSS. Yeah, I don't think it requires any explanation. One thing you might want to be aware of is if you see some other applications, you might see people writing code like this. So they are not importing style from macro, but like this directly. That will also work. So you asked me what the difference is. The difference is in the name of the CSS class that is rendered, because if you look carefully, in my case, My class name is date circle underscore date circle CSS, and that is because my main component is date circle, and then date circle is my variable name, right? To be sure, it is going to read, so it's going to prefix the class name with this thing and then with this thing. If you directly implement it from styled components without putting macro, then you will not get these two values prefixed. What you would get is just some random name for the class, which is xy blah 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 blah. The reason I use macro again is it's easy identification, is for the easy identification, right? So the other component we need to do is to make the box content with some text and a small arrow above and below. I will go ahead and create the, oops, let's go ahead and create the, let's go ahead and create the code. I will copy this piece of logic from there. Save it, everything is okay. Quick explanation, rest everything is same. I have a box CSS, and then that's my main component, takes 3 arguments, position top, text, and top. For the bottom, where do you want the bottom to be placed, the arrow to be placed? I think I could have used the same variables, but I'm not sure, but yeah, we shall see. And then I pass in these two variables, these two props to my box CSS. And depending upon that, I figure out, for example, in this case, I figure out if the box has to be placed above or below the line. So if it is, if I specify, if the position is top, then my y-axis I move it up, otherwise I move it down. So it's with respect to the line. And this is for that arrow thing. I learned how to make these arrow. Apparently it's with content nothing. So what we do is, it was new. What we do is to specify no content, but make these arrow with the help of the borders only, which is pretty cool trick. I had no idea that it is done like that. A learning thing for me also. So that's my box, nothing major about it. Let's go ahead and quickly create a new story for it. So box content.stories.js, and now I can copy my code. Let's go ahead here, copy, paste, box content. Yes, pretty much straightforward. You can see that I have not specified the value for one of the parameters. Which one is it? I think it's the position top, if I'm not mistaken. No, I think it's the text. Yes, no, text is also there, top is also there. No, my mistake. It's the position top which I'm not specifying, but it will still work. Why? Because booleans, basic data structures, booleans, strings, etc., etc., Storybook can infer it by default. But before we run it, one quick caveat. Most of the times I end up doing this, especially initially, I end up doing this error. So I wrote box CSS and then top, and I assumed it will work because I was confusing between this value, which is this prop, which is a prop for box content and not for box CSS. Because for box CSS, you need to explicitly specify it. So if I do this, it will never work. It will always be, I think, true, because by default props are set to true, and you will never go in a case where position top has to be below or false, right? So make sure that you never, if you're using styled components, that you are explicitly specifying these values. Now if I save it, and if my component works fine, I should be able to see my box component loaded, provided my story is there. uh, yes, so let's save this thing. Cool. And if I could see, that is my component rendered over here. Isn't it nice? There was controls. Where is my control? Again, with Storybook, you can do a lot of stuff. You can test your component on different resolutions. You can, yeah, make it bigger, smaller. There are docs and canvas. The world is your oyster when it comes to this one. Um, mm, mm, mm. There is a different type of mode you want. and the grids. And these are your props, which you can specify over here. Let me quickly check where was the, because I do remember it was possible to specify. I accidentally closed them. Show add-ons, yeah, it's this one. So now what I can do, see, I can change the values for my variable, for my input prop. I can even take the text. Lawrenson is the text, is the text for dummies. Very, very important functionality, especially for text. If your corporation is working with multiple languages, you would like to test them out rather than testing it at the last moment when the whole application is done. You have already loaded those components on some app.js, and then you're trying to figure out the languages. But it's very difficult for tester to do that. With Storybook, it's a breeze. So the other thing I would like to create is the box, my box component where I will be putting all these things into. So let's go ahead and box.js. Sorry, it's JS text, my mistake. Rename. Okay, let's go ahead. Over here, I only need to play around with the margins, so it's not much. The children, it means whatever render, whatever is being provided by the caller under the box. So for example, the caller, if it was app.js or something, it could do something like this. The caller application could say box and then put in an input tag over here, maybe a button tag. So the children keyword in React refers to these things. Whatever HTML or text or any other input that is provided within those components, and that's what I'm going to render it over here. So wherever I'm using box, I would of course put date and the box content component in it. So let's go ahead and clean it. That's okay. Similarly, box.stories.js. Let's go ahead, rename new file, box.stories.js. It's a dumb component with only a margin, so let's not waste time ahead for this one. That is done. Okay, the last component I would like to do is the timeline component, right? So the main component timeline, which we will load on app.js, the timeline component should be able to take the JSON object of my dates, all the date and the text and so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and create it. Since it's a big component, I would create it outside. Let's call it new file, timeline.jsx. I would copy the code over here. Let's go ahead, copy. Now, what am I doing over here? This I will explain in a minute. React, we import React, the style, my styles div. Note over here, I can have multiple styled const style variables defined within one file. So it's not that only one const of timeline CSS can be defined. Think of it as an HTML input itself. Style.div means wherever I am using timeline.css, you replace that with the div. Of course, I can do a p, a br, an input, a button, everything. All the HTML controls are available in style components. So style component will render them in those base HTML controls along with our CSS. Um, I'm using flexbox to map my all the boxes. Flex row, nothing major. Input is a JSON object with cards. It's a JSON, and then I just simply roll over with the cards. I use my box and date circle and box content. And then in the end, I put my line. Of course, the CSS takes care of rendering them nicely. Nothing major. It's again in my GitHub repo. The link is in the description. You can go ahead and have a look at it. But important thing we need to see over here is the fact that my timeline is outside my components, right? Now, what I can do, I need to incorporate all the boxes, import all of them, right? Now, one way to do it, a simple, not a simple way, but a not that easy way to do that would be to say import box from, because it's one level down, then I would have to do / components / box, right? This should do otherwise, and then I do for box content, date circle, line, and so on and so forth, right? I don't want to do that because it's, imagine if it's app.js for any big project, you end up having 30 lines of code, and then you need to figure out from where you are importing. The way to fix that is with something called a barrel file. What the idea is, you go into your components, you create a new index.js file. It has to be named as index.js. You cannot name it anything else. And over here, you export all these components. It can live anywhere, honestly, and it can export anything, but it's always a better idea to export it from the same folder. It's a convention. So in our case, what I would do is to say, go ahead, import all my components from here, and then export it from my file like this, right? And now it's within my components folders. Within the timeline, I can say simply go to my / components, and then it will load all those values again. It's called barreling. Very important concept if you are interested in front-end development. So let's go ahead. I will not go ahead and create a timeline file, stories file for this because it's self-explanatory. The only thing I'm going to do is now to change our app.js, because I need to call my timeline, which is the main component, which loads everything else within app.js. So let's go ahead here. I replace it with this. Let's call it, is it components? No, I don't think it's not in components. My mistake. It's in timeline app.css. I don't care. I don't know why I kept it over here. That's the JSON object I have created. Of course, in real life scenario, you would be making a fetch call and then loading it. And then I pass in to my timeline. So if I go to timeline, is it working? Everything is fine. My cards is an array. It comes over here. I loop through it, and then I render for each card. I render the box, the date, circle, and content, and then my line. So if I save it now, in this case, I am not writing time, the stories again. I could have done that. I could have also written the JSON. I could have sent the JSON through props through Storybook also, but yeah, I will leave it up to you. Now what I can do is, if I load my timeline, I should see my time. I should see this component rendered over here. But remember, it's not through Storybook. It is through Luke's npm start, because now I'm doing app.js. Let's go ahead and have a look at it. It's compiling. It's compiling. Oops, I seem to have got an error. As you can see, react.jsx type. What is happening? What is happening? It looks like something went wrong with my imports and exports. Let's quickly have a look in our timeline. I think I know. If I go to app.js, I am importing it correct. Yes. Timeline, what's the name? It's timeline. Yes, it should be fine. What could be wrong? What could be? It's always fun to debug your own code and try to figure out what's going on. Let's go ahead here. So timeline, it's going from components. Yes. And box content, date circle, box content. Box content. Okay, I think it's something is wrong with these values because this error, again, very important. It might be helpful to see expected a string or a class function, but got object you likely export. This is something to do with exporting and importing these values. Let's go ahead and look at our timeline function. Looks to be okay. I'm going to pause the video over here and have a look at what is going on. Hello everyone. So I'm back. I figured out what the problem was, and it's a ghost. It's a ghost sitting somewhere in Babel or in my computer. I can't figure out why. So let me show you what the problem is, where the ghost is. As you can see in the screen, this is what I had. So it's a class box. This is what I had written. This is what I had copied from. Basically, it's the same thing I had copied. But if I write this, it works. With this, it doesn't work. You can pause your video, have a look at it, and if you can figure out why it doesn't work with the top code, top section of the code, why it works with the bottom, let me know. Please let me know. Otherwise, I'm just going to go with this because it's the same thing. I will save it. Let's switch and then see if my application is working. And there it is. We have, ladies and gentlemen, our timeline rendered in React with the help of styled component and Storybook. Do let me know how it went. Was it knowledgeable for you? And if you like the video, please hit subscribe, like, and share. And I see you in the next video. Bye bye.